listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft, the people who play it. Today is June 27th, 2022, and my name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host, Jason Lucas. Jason, how are you doing on this fine Monday?
Spencer, hello. Yes, it's Monday. I don't know what's happening. The last time we recorded a show was Friday. How does any of this work? I don't know what's happening. But yeah, no, I'm doing well. I'm waiting patiently for Dragonflight Alpha to start, which I'm a little surprised after what we talked about last week that hasn't happened, up to this point. But any minute now, right? They got to be pushing something that people can start digging into and messing around with. It's a weird spot, It seems like, as far as we know, the expansion is scheduled for the end of this calendar year. Whether or not it makes it, game development is tricky, and who knows? Maybe it doesn't make it, maybe it does. But if they think they're on track to release this year, then we got to see something that we can test out pretty soon, right?
Pretty soon, yeah.
I feel like I've been saying that for 2 months.
Well, I mean, yeah. If it sort of came even more critical mass when last week they announced that the plan was for it to come out this year. So, like the past couple of months, we're like, well, if it's going to come this year, we should probably see something pretty soon. But last week they actually told us, hey, our plan is this year. So now that's like, okay, well, if you guys actually want to follow through with that, let's see something soon. So yeah, I'm feeling you. I want some alpha access.
I mean, just a couple of points of clarification there, I guess, just to kind of bring it, into the realm of reality. Like, I'm okay with them doing a shorter public test phase, right? I don't think that 7.5 months or whatever of public testing of Shadowlands really improved launch Shadowlands in any appreciable way to players. Like, maybe they got some good info about, whatever tech was behind it, and it helped with a smooth launch. The launch was smooth. I think they used the extra time to polish up the Maw as an in-game zone, which most players seem to have hated anyway. They didn't really address the persistent feedback they received about stuff like Covenant switching, conduit energy, multiple issues with how Torghast was integrated into the larger game, and some tuning and balance issues. These things didn't get resolved at launch, and they were unpopular at launch. So, I don't think like the testing phase is really vital to the success or failure of an expansion, because the design is locked in to some degree even now, right? Like, stuff is going to change certainly, but it kind of is what it is. And also, WoW is a really long and kind of winding production pipeline, right? And it's not like they started working on Dragonflight in April when they announced it. There were people working on it 2 years ago, and if Dragonflight ships at the last week of 2022, it will be, call it 25 months since the prior expansion release, and that will be one of the longer gaps from expansion release to expansion release in the 18-year history of the game. About 24 months is like the median average. I think it's like 24 and a half months is the median average of time between releases, and for the most part, the releases have been 21, 22 months apart over the years. So,
well, and this speaks to the point that I guess the counterpoint to what people have been sort of pushing around social media of feels like it's going to be a rushed expansion. They're rushing Dragonflight out.
Right. And I'm not saying that Dragonflight's going to definitely be amazing when it launches, and there are going to be minor problems that don't impact the experience. I've played the last 2 expansions. Like, it is what it is, and if that means that you don't want to play it at launch, if you don't want to pre-order the game, don't. You shouldn't, and you should wait until the expansion gets more polished and it becomes more frictionless. That's what you should do. If this kind of thing bothers you, I think WoW has always sort of had this thing of like, okay, an expansion comes out, it has some cool features, it has some interesting ideas, some of the stuff doesn't pan out. They sort of bend it into shape over the course of, a year and a half of patching it and around player behavior, and they open stuff up so that, players can catch up or play different characters or whatever. That's been the general kind of ebb and flow of pretty much every release ever, even going back to original vanilla WoW, and I feel like it's just sort of part of the cost of doing business when it comes to playing a live service MMORPG. I am not here to predict that Dragonflight will be amazing the moment that it drops and everyone will be happy, but I do not believe that it's going to require significantly more time in the oven than 25 to 27 months, like every other expansion that has ever existed. I mean, they can't sit on it until it's perfect, right? That just doesn't work with a game like this. And WoW didn't launch like that, and no expansion has ever launched like that. And it's sort of just it's just the way it works, right? That stuff is going to be more restrictive when it releases. They're going to play things closer to the vest earlier on, and they're going to open it up over the course of time. Those are deliberate design decisions. From what they're telling us about what they want to do with Dragonflight, it seems like it's going to be gentler, right? Stuff is going to be more alt friendly. You're going to have a lot more flexible choices to make, and you're not going to be locked into such rigidity with systems and content, right? You're going to have kind of a menu of stuff to do, and you can make choices about how your character works in the stuff that you're doing, and then you can collect stuff for your dragon riding, and there you go. There's your expansion for 10.0 for the first patch cycle. So, that might mean that there's less overall stuff to test. You're not testing and balancing a Torghast. You're not, building out these nested covenant systems and all these other things and trying to dial that in. So, the public testing and the value they get out of that, it's more narrow maybe for something like this. And I don't know. I think my hope is that 9.2 shows that they've learned a lot of lessons of late, and that there's a bit of a philosophy shift about like the modern WoW player. If that carries through, then I think it'll be okay. I don't know. It's just when I think of there being 24, 25 months between expansion releases, no matter what, like I don't have alarm bells going off in my head. That is the schedule this game has been published on since 2004.
Yeah, and I think that's the point that is important to hang on to too, is the fact that this isn't going to be a rushed expansion. They're going to have the same amount of time, if not more time, to develop this next upcoming expansion as they had with previous ones. So don't feel like, oh no, 6 months away, that's impossible. They can't do that. It's like, no, they've been working on this thing for a year and a half, 2 years. Let's calm down and acknowledge that this could easily still be a delivered product the way that we'd expect from any other expansion. So
yeah, it might be awesome. It might still suck, but it's not really going to be the schedule's fault overall.
Exactly.
At least in terms of like meeting the needs of the product, the customers. We need new stuff to do, and I don't know. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. I feel like the perfect is the enemy of the good in this situation, and I'd rather have new stuff to do that then maybe has some blemishes that they need to hammer out. And if this is a new leaf for the WoW team, then I'm confident that they'll do that more quickly than we've seen with, the last two expansions. Yeah.
Now, last week, as far as Blizzard news went, we talked a little bit about ABK and a little bit about basically an investigation they did into themselves by someone they hired.
Right.
And there was some results of a shareholders meeting that happened this past week, and we want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, when we recorded last, right after we were done, they released the results of the annual shareholders meeting, which were not public information before we recorded. And we talked about a couple things that were up for on the ballot, essentially, for the shareholders. And it's mostly bad news. The board, including Bobby Kotick, was reelected, and the executive compensation proposal was approved. So all the board members are getting paid. The nomination of an employee representative director was rejected, which is really unfortunate but unsurprising. I mean, this is just cronyism at its finest. They don't want employees having a seat at the table, and they are apparently not bound to do so. So that got voted down. The only kind of silver lining from the annual shareholders meeting was that the shareholders did approve a proposal to prepare a report about the company's efforts to prevent abuse, harassment, and discrimination. Now, this is not legally binding. The board does not have to deliver this or face consequences. So hopefully, that they make good on this. Maybe shareholders can put pressure on them to deliver it. Maybe, the workers can get involved somehow to make sure that this gets delivered. this was one of the big things that they were trying to avoid the shareholders voting for. They asked them not to. They said, don't do this. Everything's fine.
Yeah.
Look, we investigated ourselves, and it's really not that bad. Everybody made too big of a deal out of it.
As a matter of fact, we're better than most.
Right, which seems just like patently untrue based on what we know, or at least based around sentiment from so many people we've heard that have stepped forward. So, we'll keep an eye on how that develops. This is a lot of wins for the board here. These items, they got most of what they wanted, and I'm sure the report is going to be a lot of fluff and nonsense like the back padding that they released last week. But I don't know, maybe they can get some kind of actual independent investigation to prepare the report or something. And some degree of public pressure, I guess, on the board is good. It's good that the shareholders said, no, we want you to tell us about this, but it's hard to be confident that anything is going to change drastically with this leadership. And it's like, best case scenario here, it increasingly seems like the Microsoft deal is approved, which is probably not really overall great for consumers or labor, but is what it is. And then Microsoft, eventually dissolves Activision Blizzard. The studios have some degree of autonomy under a more like siloed structure with Microsoft, and Blizzard employees will be treated better, and their union will be recognized for the Raven QA, and maybe that inspires more teams and more studios to collectively bargain with Microsoft or something. Like, this is all kind of pie in the sky, but clearly, anything going on with Activision Blizzard is not going to change. This stuff seems locked in. They're pretty protected. It's not like I don't see a situation where we wake up one day and it's like, Bobby Kotick's actually leaving Activision Blizzard in disgrace in advance of the Microsoft deal, and they're cleaning house with the board and things are going to change. And I think we're locked in here.
It would be interesting to hear whether or not Bobby is like part of the deal with Microsoft is Bobby leaves when Microsoft comes in. I'm a little curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that remains to be seen as far as public knowledge goes. I mean, I don't think it's going to be like he's out the door day one, unfortunately. But I can't imagine, like, at a certain point, cashing out seemed like probably the best option for him, and that's probably a big driver for the sale. So
right.
We'll see what happens next summer. I think the deal is supposed to close if it's approved by regulators and stuff. So, things are not going to get better at the top of Activision Blizzard on their own, is what we are, increasingly being confronted with.
Right. All right. Well, back into World of Warcraft, and that for the rest of the episode is last week in WoW, what we did last week. So this past week for me, we're still kind of on raid break. We're on raid break for this week as well, and then next week we're going to start going back into it again. So I'm like, as much as I'm looking forward to getting back into raiding, I am enjoying this raid break very much. Mm-hmm. So it's been really nice. It's been really beneficial for me to be able to sort of mental health, get out of the game, get away from prog for a bit after progging for so long, and sort of refresh my gaming taste in other games. But this past week, despite being on break, we still went and did the achievement run, which was just kind of just for fun. Took us about an hour and a half, 2 hours to do on normal. And I talked about this we had our patron call-in show, as Jason mentioned, on Friday this past week. So I talked about this a bit there, but I want to share a little bit more here just because, this is like the main show and not everyone listens to the patron call-in shows. Last week's was very good. It was speaking specifically about raid balancing and people's opinions on how hard raid should be. So if that's a topic that is interesting to you, you should definitely go back and listen to that episode. It's a great episode where we chat about that with our patrons. But yeah, the achievement run was fun. A lot of the achievements for this particular raid involve dragging something, a mob or a buff or something from outside of the boss encounters into the boss encounters. And one of the ones, I think it was for Anduin, was you had to collect all of these nodes from around the zone and then go in and fight Anduin, which was kind of a different kind of experience. And in doing that, you then spawned an additional ad and you had to kill that ad, and it was in the downstairs phase to kill. So that was interesting kind of like achievement based stuff. I do enjoy that. And Jason, you mentioned this on the call-in show, that there was no multi-week achievements in this raid tier. This raid tier's achievements are all, you can do them in one run, which feels really good. Probably the most difficult of which are ones where everyone has to be alive with a particular buff when the actual encounter dies. So fights like that are Halandris, throughout the run from phase 1 to phase 2, there are these orbs that you pick up, and then the same thing between phase 2 and phase 3. And you basically have to hold on to these orbs throughout the encounter. And what happens is when you get to phase 3, Halandris absorbs all of these orbs and then spawns ads for each of them, and you have to kill all the ads. So there's a few things where, like, if anyone dies who's carrying an orb, like, for example, if they get knocked off the edge, because some of these orbs are placed in a position where you have to precariously lean over the edge of the map to click on something that's down on the cliff face, and it's during an intermission, so there's big knockbacks happening. If you get knocked off the edge, then you just have to start over. So there's a few encounters like that where you have to keep that in mind. There's also ones, the other big one was, and we talked about this too, was the, what are they called? The 4 bosses that are all one count.
Pantheon.
Pantheon. That's the word. I was like, it starts with a P. I can't remember it. The Pantheon. Yeah. Thank you. The Pantheon fight itself, everyone has to get a buff from petting corgis. Basically, when the wild rush happens, you have to click on the corgis. There's going to be really, really small, like smaller than pet-sized corgis running around, as well as like very large ones that are part of the actual wild rush. And you have to click on these corgis. And basically, when you click on one to pet it, everyone within, it says 15 yards on like Wowhead and the achievement tracker and stuff, but it's really like 5 yards. It's very small. Gets a a buff for petting the corgi. And everyone in your raid has to have 4 of these buffs, which means that you end up with people in the raid who have 9 and people in the raid who have 1. And you sort of have to be like, Joe, get over here and stand in this thing. What are you doing out there? Like, you need to be doing this buff. And through that whole phase, you're taking continual ticking damage. So even on normal, it was like, oh, we actually have to like heal to keep everyone alive. Like, there is some effort that we have to put in with the whole raid taking damage, because that's a phase where normally you're healing up the flowers and you're kind of pushing through that phase. So it was one of the ones that probably took us the longest time in the fight to accomplish, like during like mid-fight. I think we only had to wipe once or twice to bosses because of a failed achievement where either someone died. Halandris was one of them, because we had to actually like figure out exactly where all the things we had to click were. But then outside of that, I think most of the other fights went fairly smooth. The Dreadlords fight, you have to solve a puzzle during the mind control phase. Basically, everyone gets mind controlled, and then at one of the 4 corners of the room, there's a puzzle box puzzle that you have to sort of solve during that. One person has to go off and solve during that, and if once they've solved it, you can then complete that phase and then beat the fight. And I would definitely say DPS helps a lot. So if you're a team who's like, I want to do the achievement run stuff, if you have really good damage to lean on, then you can essentially end the fights before you run into situations where people could die more often. We ran into this with a couple of bosses where like, oh, we only had to deal with this mechanic once, Dos Agni, where like the rings come out. You basically have to have someone hold an orb that you get from an ad outside of the fight, and if you kill the person who's holding the orb can't get hit by a ring, so you put it on a mage or something who can blink through it, or someone who can use Venthyr to do their mirror through it. But if you kill Dos Agni before you even see 2 or 3 rings, then it makes the fight a lot easier. So there's definitely some DPS that can help with that kind of thing. But yeah, overall, fun run. Really enjoyed it. The Jailer one, for those who are curious, is when you get a bomb and you jump into a hole to explode. There's an orb that is in each of those quadrants, and you have to explode and go up into the air and then fall through the orb that's there, and you have to collect all of the orbs that are on the platform by doing that. So basically you sort of sit in that phase 1, phase 2 kind of period for long enough that people are able to blow up and get all the orbs, and then you just sort of end the Jailer fight at that point. The big tip I would give everyone is track the achievements. Like, go and open up your achievements and just shift click all the achievements you want to track, because they'll all show up as red text. And the moment they change from red text to white text, you know you've actually succeeded in doing the achievement goal that you need to do during that encounter. So it's super helpful to have that tracked and then be like, oh, okay, it actually acknowledged that I have accomplished this achievement, and I can now actually kill the boss without worrying about not getting it. So yeah, overall, fun run. But that was the majority of my week in WoW, was just getting that achievement run done and having a good time with the team.
Nice. Yeah, we'll squeeze it in probably right before Season 4 starts. I don't know. We have time, so maybe we do it in Season 4. It's hard to say. it might be easier to just assume that's the end of season 3 is the time to do it because tuning will be kind of locked in and it'll be kind of a known quantity. So I don't know, maybe that's what we'll do. But yeah, those are always fun, and it's good that they don't have one that you got to come back for week 3, 4, or even longer to do, something slightly different. Those are always annoying. So yeah, it's nice to hear that they're moving away from that, which they mostly have over the years anyway, but those were not my favorite. Yeah, for us, it was another two-night week. I was out last night, and some other people were going to be out, so I don't think that there was a raid of any kind. I think after the next week or two here, we should be back on a more typical schedule, but as summertime's spinning up, people have stuff going on, there's stuff happening. So, an old raid is not really, it's not really putting butts in seats as much.
Yeah.
So, it happens, but it was a much better week. We had a healthier group. We had like 17, 18 people for most of the week. We managed to kill basically everything up to Jailer. Halandris mostly worked, even though the floor disappeared for a little while, but at least we could see what was...
Oh my God.
Well, we could see the stuff that was shooting at the floor, so we could still kill it.
The Halandris fight, when we were doing the achievement run, when we hit phase 3, depending on how you pivoted your camera, like if you just used your left click or right click to just turn your camera, just rotate it slowly, you'd watch different panels of the floor and fight disappear. Like just literally you'd see these giant squares disappear from being stuff that was rendered in. I don't know what happened to that fight, like what they did to break that, but it is really broken. Like you can accomplish the encounter, you can do it, but it looks janky. Like they really need to get in and have a look at it for sure.
Yeah, I mean, there were more hotfixes about the arena this week, and I haven't done it since they were published, so maybe it's better now. But yeah, it was weird, but at least we killed it without too much of a technical problem this week, and we got back up to Heroic Jailer without really getting hard stuck on any particular bosses, which felt good because it had kind of been a while. Again, it helps when you actually have enough, different types of class and role coverage to do all the mechanics on some of these fights. So that was cool. We didn't have enough time to put Heroic Jailer back down, but it was one of those things where we got there with, I don't know, maybe a half hour, 45 minutes, something to, left in the night. And first pull, we got him to like 23%, and it was decently clean. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll clean him up next time. And then we just did worse on every pull until we ran out of time. So, whatever. Well, I think we're going to start there this week. We have some people who still don't have AOTC, so I'm going to be out Wednesday this week, which kind of throws a wrench into the schedule. So, we'll prioritize it, and then, people can do farm bosses or whatever for Wednesday night. I did a few dungeons. I'm trying to maybe see if I could squeeze one more dungeon in to finish the weekly and get a second vault choice tonight, hopefully. I got a little bit of rating because I think I got one more like non-20 score off of my board. I think it was Tyrannical Gambit. I had like a 18 or 19 scoring on, so it's cool to get that stuff out of there. I'm not really pushing rating or anything. I don't really care about doing anything above 20. I got my 278 conduits. I got all my portals. I'm pretty happy. But it's still fun to do the challenging dungeons and try to do them a little bit better or push, one extra rank or whatever. And it really wasn't overall a terrible week for that kind of stuff. I finished up with my Midsummer collectibles. I got all the toys and the pet that I was missing, the helm of the Firefest, whatever it's called. Like, yeah, so that's, I don't know. I mean, just between I needed a Cinder Crawler and the helm, that's 700 blossoms right there. And then I think I don't know when these toys came in, but I was missing a couple cheap toys as well, like 100 blossoms, 150 blossoms, something like that, per toy. So I had 3 tunes going for the first few days. I had one tune kind of scoop up the cheap stuff, and I had one tune save up for one of the big things, and then a third tune kind of buy something in the middle and then save up again to buy the last expensive thing. So that's all done, which is awesome. I mean, last year they changed it to add a ton of extra dailies to this event. So that's 60 blossoms a day just from doing those dailies. Make it 70 with the 2 master fire guy dailies, right? The torch dailies. And then you get, I don't know, 8 to 15 or something from a hoon. So, that's a pretty hefty dose of blossoms that you can get. There's a ton of stuff on the vendor, though. They added so much stuff to the Firefest over the years. So that's why I was so behind. I hadn't done it, like last year was the first year I went back and really started trying to check stuff off the list. And when you have multiple things that cost 350 or more blossoms that you're missing, you do eventually run out of time, patience, blossoms. But I'm all done for now until they add anything else. And the other thing I did this week, I talked last week about how, and the week before, I've sort of come to all these endings for 9.2. I'm just out of kind of stuff that I care about doing in 9.2. And part of that has been like, it's been good because doing Midsummer stuff, it takes time to go to all these different places and kill these mobs and get these quests done. But it's kind of cool to do something that's detached from that, progression drumbeat, that like seasonal kind of, routine, and just go hang out in Azeroth and do stuff in the world and, appreciate some of the timeless qualities of the game. And that's what I've been doing a bit more lately than just trying to slam alts through Zereth Mortis. So I talked about this a few times about this being on my list, but this week I finally took the plunge. I created a Blood Elf Paladin. I want to get the new heritage stuff on the Paladin. I'm not sure if I needed to create a Blood Elf Paladin specifically. I don't know if it's good enough to just like have a Blood Elf go do the new quest at level 60 and get the new stuff. But I figured, I don't even care. I want to do this. Like I want to take this journey. I haven't leveled up a new character in the new experience. So I'm going to play through that and see how it goes. And I've been having a really good time. I think the experience is really smooth. You basically get one new spell or modified spell or something per level. So you start off with like one ability, and then you do one quest, and then you become level 2 and you get your second ability. And it's nice. The curve feels really gentle. It's good timing. Like I was kind of waiting to see how I felt when Midsummer started, because that XP buff is pretty nice, and also the stat buff that you can get from it. It just stuff just dies. I'm in full heirlooms, which doesn't give you XP bonus anymore, but it does slow down how fast you burn through your rested. It gives you a lot of out of combat regen and stuff, so you can just keep playing the game and keep stay in combat and everything. And obviously, like, they're just good items that level up with you. So.
I haven't leveled a character in long enough that I actually forgot all the changes to heirlooms that had taken place a while back.
Yeah, they don't work like they used to, but they're still really good items to have. Like, I don't regret my investment in them, certainly. And I'm into Ghostlands now. I'm just doing the Blood Elf starting experience because you need Exalted Silvermoon rep, and I'm like most of the way to Revered, or like 2/3 of the way to Revered, just from doing those quests. A lot of Ghostland quests don't give Silvermoon rep, but I figured it was worth going through this process, and then I'll get a Tabard and farm dungeon rep when I have to.
Right.
And I went double gathering. I went mining herbing, and with the Caravan Brutosaur, like, I just dump everything on the AH, and this character is level 26 and is on a server with a dead economy and is walking around with like 3,000 gold in his pocket. So, that's pretty nice. That's a nice little perk, and there's so much stuff to pick up. Like, I'm mostly just leveling from herbing and mining, honestly, and then the quests are a nice bonus. So, I don't have any big time frame on this. I'm already halfway, in terms of just raw amount of levels through the pre-Shadowlands experience. So I'm enjoying myself. I'm sure I'll get it done before Dragonflight comes out, but it's just kind of like a thing that I can do to zone out and enjoy. And I like the new leveling experience quite a bit. I didn't think the old one was bad, but the rework, I think, is probably a bit more inviting to new players or people who've been out for a really long time. Because they don't overwhelm you with information about your character. It's more like, here, play with this thing for 15 minutes. Okay, now here's one other new thing to play with. So that's cool. And I'm looking forward to picking up all those other cosmetics, because I can't say no to stuff like that.
Yeah, it's certainly a cool feature whenever they go back and re-add things for people who've either haven't leveled up yet or have leveled up a particular character class combination. I really dig that stuff. I still don't have green fire on my Warlock kind of thing. Like, there's so many things out there that you're like, oh, this would be really cool to get. I should put some effort into doing this at some point, and it fills the gaps in expansion time, like we're sort of in right now, if those are some of the goals and objectives you have.
Yeah, I think that's really more on the menu for me at this time than at other times. It feels like the right time for me to be doing stuff like that, because I need I want to play WoW, but I need a break from the Shadowlands endgame loop. So
yeah.
It kind of it works out.
Yeah. All right, folks. With that, let's jump into what's going on this week in World of Warcraft. All right, this week in World of Warcraft is the Pet Battle bonus event, meaning that the Sign of the Critter buff is up, where Pet Battle experience gains are increased by 200%. And of course, there's that quest to win 5 PvP pet battles that reward an ultimate pet battle training stone that instantly trains any pet to level 25. It's a consumable, one-time use. Just keep that in mind. It's not like a... It'd be cool if it was like a 4-day cooldown. You could just do a pet every 4 days or something. Like, I'd be down for some sort of reward or thing like that with pet training. It'd be a good time. There's so many pets out there.
I mean, something with, I don't know. I mean, they gave the whole pet battle thing a bit of a facelift of late. I don't know. I mean, I don't think there would be anything that would make me want to get into it. So, and I don't know how like people who take pet battling seriously feel about, what needs to be done. It's just so off my radar. It's weird because obviously it took a long time to build these systems and they maintain them from expansion to expansion. But my brain, it's just not a thing on my menu at all.
Yeah, my brain just goes to mercenaries inside of Hearthstone, where you essentially have a training camp where you can send your mercenaries off to train. If you haven't been doing this, just as an FYI, if the mode is ever going to interest you ever, basically you log into Hearthstone, click on mercenaries, and then just drag one of your champions into this like training window, and it will just gain like 20 levels in 24 hours. And you can just keep doing that every day. And I'm like, I'd love that for a pet battle thing. Let me hire a professional trainer for my little pets and just send my pets off to camp every, 3 days or 2 days or whatever it is. Maybe once a week, send a pet off to camp and it comes back full level. That'd be fun, right? That'd be a cool
that
thing.
would be good because the leveling is, just one part of it, right? You still have the quality concerns, and then you have to have like the loadouts, and you got to go find the stuff to do, and then you have to win. So, I think that would be, it's like, I mean, obviously pet battling was really influenced by Pokemon. I don't think that's revolutionary to say. Like, it's sort of just like the whole thing is like, let's build a Pokemon mode inside of WoW. And like, that's just Pokemon daycare right there. Just, pay an NPC to let your Pokemon gain levels as you do other stuff. Like that's how those games have sort of always worked, or have worked for a very, very long time. And yeah, I think that would be cool because it would be like, okay, well, I want to try out maybe, end game pet battling stuff or the dungeons or whatever, but I don't have the right Pokemon pets leveled, and I don't want to like do all of that first before the mood passes me to do this thing I don't normally do, right? Like if you just had them at level or whatever, I think it would be a bit more appealing for maybe casual players in the pet battle realm.
Well, I also think because they add hundreds of pets every expansion, and you're like, there are thousands upon thousands of pets now. Even if it was like you can send 3 away to camp, every day, it's still going to take over a year to do all of your pets. Like, we're not talking about a system that would be broken or whatever it is. Like the leveling of pets, sure, that is an experience that's fun, and you could certainly encourage players to do that still if they wanted. If you were trying to level up a team, it would still be faster to be like, well, I'll send these ones away to this camp and I'll level up this one on my own, and you can get a whole team ready in a week kind of idea would be kind of neat. But I just feel like a system like this would make it more accessible to players. I know that, sure, you can pet battle at any level and the whole thing scales to the system. I just find that less attractive to me than I want to have all 3 of those abilities. I want to have all 3 of the abilities on my pet be powerful abilities. And when I look up guides for anything like this or what other people are doing in pet battling, they're always about max level. Like they're not going, oh, well, just use these 3 level 1 pets with this one ability. And you're like, this is like the most boring system in the world.
Right.
Like,
it's not really going to be the optimal strategy, I would imagine.
Well, and it just isn't as stimulating an experience to be like, yes, I can only press one button. So let's go into this pet battle and press this one button 3 times and then switch pets and press this one button 3 times. Versus actually having a strategy and having abilities that interact, right? Putting up a damage increase debuff on a pet and then switching it to another one and then hitting that pet hard with an ability that takes advantage of that, or takes advantage of, because they put in weather effects, so it takes advantage of the weather effects that are taking place. So I would like to see a system where you basically are sending off your pets to summer camp to gain a bunch of levels and come back to you. I think would be a pretty fun system inside the game. So yeah. All right, as far as this week goes, you want to pick up a new deal quest inside Oribos, and then do your Patterns within Patterns quest inside Zereth Mortis. We have the PvP Brawl going on with Arathi Blizzard. This is the quest where basically, the quest you get is something different, but this is the Brawl, where you go into Arathi Basin, and basically there's a blizzard happening, so the lake is frozen, and your sightlines are decreased. So it's essentially a Arathi basin, but with slightly more access to go from lumber mill, slightly less access to go from lumber mill to blacksmith, because you can't see whether or not you need to. So a little more emphasis on call outs and your team being active in that, but a little bit more access to go from blacksmith to farm or to stables are the other ones that are going on there. So just keep that in mind with that brawl for this week.
Does this mean that Ahun won if there's Arathi Blizzard during
that would be a cool thing. If during Midsummer Fire Festival, they're like, for a special twist, Ahun is at blacksmith, and you just like literally have this like boss, like an actual boss sitting at blacksmith, where as people try and take the point, they have to fight this, boss that's there. And whoever ends up controlling it then becomes friendly to Ahun, and then they like the other team has to fight. Yeah, like it'd be cool. I'd be down with
somebody else,
some extra twist. It's a brawl. They can do silly things.
Yeah. Or I mean, even if it was just not even like a gameplay mechanic, but it was just thematic, like Ahun was just hanging out there somewhere or something. That would be neat when this overlaps. It might be too rare for them to be able to bother planning anything for it.
Yeah, no, it's true. All right, as far as the weekly world boss goes, Oranamonos the Ever-Branching is up in Ardenweald, and this guy drops some memories, Jason. Which ones for those who are leveling new characters or just trying the back of the game?
Yeah, so this week you got Fevered Incantation for mages, Surging Shots for hunters, and Verdant Infusion for druids. So if you have a mage, a hunter, or a druid that does not know all of its legendary memories, do not forget to go over there and do Oranamonos this week and check that off your list.
Yeah. The other two world bosses that are also up are, of course, Morgeth and Antros. Both of these drop Anima as well as Oranamonos, so it's a great way to get a bunch of Anima for the week. And then Antros drops that 259 eye-level gear that's out in Zereth Mortis, so be sure you're knocking out Antros for those big gear upgrades if you're someone who's trying to get a character going for Raiden and whatnot. Mythic Plus affixes for the week are Fortified, Bolstering, and Quaking, meaning non-boss enemies have more health and inflict more damage. When slain, any non-boss enemy's death cry empowers its nearby allies, increasing their maximum health and damage. And periodically, all players emit a shockwave, inflicting damage and interrupting nearby allies. So, this is a bit of a trash week in the sense that not only do mobs have more health from Fortified, but when they get low on health, which there's of course a higher percentage of health or higher amount of health than they normally have, they then empower their allies with their death cries when they die, and it increases that Fortified by an increased amount of maximum health and damage from bolstering. It's one of those overlaps where you're like, all right, you can build a boss incredibly quickly on a Fortified bolstering week. So those little slimes at the start of Plaguefall, you want to be aware of what you're doing, because you're going to build a boss very quickly if you just run in there and start DPSing them all down. The fortunate thing for you is Quaking's like almost a non-affix for those who aren't casting a lot of channeled spells. As long as you are spreading out from your teammates whenever Quaking's happening, you're not going to chunk them for damage. And even if you do, there's not another mechanic that's like massively doing damage to your allies on a regular basis. You're not dealing with any kind of bleeds or sanguine puddles or something like that people are taking damage from. So Quaking isn't as effective as far as that goes. But yeah, just the channeled spells. So if you're someone who's channeling Tranquility or Convoke or whatever those are, being sure that you're waiting for a quake to happen before you engage in doing that, because otherwise you're going to have a very rude awakening when you have to either cancel it early, or in the case of Convoke, you're spamming your escape key to stop channeling it because you don't want to get interrupted. Yeah, it's no fun to get interrupted by quaking, so keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, overall, I mean, I think this is a pretty good week.
Yeah,
I think especially if you're trying to knock out like a big achievement, like
if you want to kill big bosses, yeah.
Yeah, like this is, like bolstering. I mean, everything you said is true, but I feel like we're living in a world of like very high AoE or cleave damage, and like fortified weeks don't even feel like fortified weeks in many cases anymore. And also bolstering just goes away now. It doesn't last.
That's true. Yeah.
Forever. Like it will tick down. So even if you do make a huge mistake, like you might cost yourself like 15 seconds maybe, but it's not going to be a thing where you got to like reset a mob or something. Quaking is, you just got to watch positioning, and they've made quaking a lot easier to deal with. So I think overall this is a pretty good week. Like, yes, you do want to try to cleave stuff evenly, and that can create issues because if fort mobs are alive for a really long time, then they could get a lot of value with, especially ones that have like random target spells or attacks that they do. Debuffs going out that require maybe a dispel or something that can really kind of tax your healer mana, or just like nuke your group down. So, I'm not saying that this is going to be like a cakewalk to bang out 20s this week. No, not necessarily. But I do think that this combo is pretty good. It's like laser focused on the trash element, right? So bosses will be relatively easy. Quaking presents problems with a few bosses because of positioning requirements, and that does complicate things, but it's not super punishing overall I don't feel like when you look at the totality of the dungeon pool. So bosses are just going to be nuked in 90 seconds or whatever. They're going to be very killable, and that also means like maybe you can. I feel like it's actually okay to pull bigger here, even though you have bolster, if you have the tools to handle it, right? Like if you have classes that have really strong AoE, then you can pull 8 mobs, and as long as you kill most of them around the same time, then you're probably okay. So I feel like it's just less punishing this week than on some other weeks with the changes to bolstering. To pull bigger on a fort week, and then maybe you're actually saving time that way, which can result in really, really adding up by the end of a fortified dungeon. A lot of times we talk about how, a fort week, like you want to try to pick up time, but it can be very punishing to try to do so in between bosses. So I don't know. I think this is going to be a pretty good combo for the state of like balance, the state of gear, people with 4 pieces and maxed out legendaries and all that. I mean, when this came around the first time, we were only a couple weeks into the season. So, not everybody had that stuff yet. It was you'd have to be pretty lucky to have your 4-set bonus by then. So yeah, I don't know. I'm looking forward to getting in there this week and seeing what we can do. It should be really good if you need fort rating or you need to bang out KSM or something.
Yeah, exactly. And then you mentioned earlier that you were working on leveling some stuff using Midsummer Fire Festival. Yes, that is live through July 5th. And so if you're someone who wants to go out and honor or extinguish the bonfires and get yourself some burning blossoms, buy up all those pets and toys and cosmetics, or just dance around the ribbon dance and get yourself the 10% bonus experience for killing monsters, that is something that's worth participating in. So be sure you're heading over and taking advantage of that through this week. And the other thing that's starting up this week is Darkmoon Fare, and that's going to run from July 3rd until the 9th. Now, we had mentioned before that these buffs don't stack. At least they didn't the last time they were around, and the assumption would be they still don't. So you probably want the Darkmoon Fare one over the Ribbon Dance, because the Darkmoon Fare one is all experience increased by 10%, whereas the Ribbon Dance is just from killing monsters. So keep that in mind as well if you're actually looking to take advantage of experience through this week. Be sure you're just getting the Darkmoon Fare one. The Ribbon Dance one won't actually help you as much, unless they do miraculously stack this time and someone
maybe
changed it up. Who knows? If they can break Halandris the way they did, maybe they can make these buffs stack. Never.
I mean,
never know.
I'm pretty sure it's like intentional, but the thing that I guess you can do, right? Like, especially if you're leveling up a fresh character, a low level character, you're probably in a zone where maybe you have like 7 or 8 active quests at once. And
yeah,
the good thing about the Midsummer buff is you can pretty much pick it up, refresh it, whatever, in every zone. Like near most like big quest hubs, there's a place where you can refresh it. So you can go out there, refresh it, go kill everything you need to kill, collect everything you need to collect for your quest, and take a little break, head back to DMF, go get your other buff, twist it over to the other one, then turn everything in for that bonus XP in the turn-ins. And, that might be like a pretty decent use of your time if you don't have top hats and stuff. So that would probably work pretty well. But the nice thing about overall the Midsummer buff is just straight up worse for leveling. But the nice thing about it is how easy it is to reapply, because you're always probably near a pole or whatever.
Yeah. The other big factor, I guess, there is the top hats, like you mentioned. Just reminding people that they exist. Basically, you can spend Darkmoon Fare tokens on buying top hats. These are consumables that sit in your inventory for the duration of Darkmoon Fare. They disappear after Darkmoon Fare has ended, where on use it gives you a 1 hour 10% increased experience from all sources and reputation from all sources buff. So If you want to be out in the world and you're worried about dying or just being out there for 2 or 3 hours, and you don't have to keep going back to Darkmoon Fare, you can buy yourself a couple of top hats and use those as a way to gain the reputation experience that you're wanting to gain. So just keep that in mind as well. All right, the Fireworks Spectacular is happening. This is the July 4th celebration that takes place, and basically after the sun sets, the end of Midsummer is celebrated with an hourly fireworks extravaganza. You can basically watch the show in any capital city or Booty Bay. Booty Bay being probably the best place to watch, in my opinion. You can flop down on the roof of the inn that's there and watch the fireworks go off behind the large sort of island statue area that takes place. It's pretty awesome. I mean, even at flopping on the roofs inside of Stormwind or Orgrimmar are great, but Booty Bay's where it's at. This is the place.
Yeah, I agree. It's best in slot for watching the fireworks thing if that's what you're going to do. But yeah, you can do it in a lot of different places, which is cool, but it doesn't run very long. I think it doesn't even start at reset on the 4th. It starts like a couple hours later, and then it ends like very early in the morning on the 5th. So if you want to check it out, you got like not even one whole day to do so.
Yeah, just making sure that if you want to see it, if you want some really fun screenshots, it's always cool to sort of get together with some buddies and all of you pose for a screenshot, do a little emote or something in front of the fireworks. It's pretty fun. So do take advantage if that's something that interests you, for sure. Okay, so we're going to shift gears a little bit into some classic stuff because there's been a whole bunch of classic hubbubaloo going on with classic realm consolidations for Burning Crusade, with another buff that's coming out for Burning Crusade, with why they're adjusting dungeon experience, with a whole bunch of things. We just want to cover a bunch of it here real quick. And then we'll move.
Yeah, we're certainly not like classic experts, but Wrath Classic Beta opened up to a limited number of players last week. I wouldn't be shocked to see that live by like October, which means they got to get the house in order with a lot of these changes they want to do to Burning Crusade Classic Realms. And this is stuff that we don't really play a lot, but might dabble in here and there. But it is part of your subscription and your account, and it's stuff you want to pay attention to. And they are making some cool stuff happen in the lead up to Wrath coming out. So this was kind of the bulk of the blue text news that we got last week.
Yeah, and I also want to mention we are going to cover some of the hot fixes with the live game later in the show, and then we actually have a developer wrap up at the end of the show, which is specifically thoughts on realm consolidation, which is a pretty cool thing to sort of hear. That's another cool tidbit that came out of the community council. So we want to be sure that we're sharing that info with everybody as well. But to start it all off, we have the Burning Crusade Realm consolidations taking place, and they'll be happening in August, I believe, is when they're actually going to be taking place. For
August 9th, I think, is like the drop dead date, at least for NA. I'm not sure if it's the same for all regions, but yeah, I think August 9th is what we're looking at in NA.
Yeah, so they have free server transfers happening right now off of lower population realms. To sort of encourage people to move. There was restrictions around, like, if you don't move before the drop dead date, as Jason sort of put it, for August 9th, then your character could potentially be locked up in paperwork and red tape for 2 weeks, which means you might lose access to your character for that period of time. So it's important that you are moving your characters around if that's something you want to do. And Jason, there's another twist that we got this week from Kyvax on this whole thing.
Yeah, well, one thing that was not, when this was first announced, one thing they said was going to happen was they were going to lift the restriction on transferring from a PvE to PvP realm, and they were also going to lift the restriction on having a character of each faction on a PvP realm, and they were going to lift single realm character limits, and they were all lifted as of June 21st. So if you were waiting because you needed to move from a PvE to a PvP realm, or because you needed to move an alliance character onto a PvP realm that you had a horde character on, or if you were waiting because you had too many characters on one particular realm, none of that stuff should prevent you now from setting up your tunes that need to move in a way that you want them to be set up. So basically, this is just our reminder encouraging you, if you are on an affected realm, and you can check the list for your region on the Burning Crusade Classic forums, which realms are going to be consolidated, essentially closed. You should take care of this in advance, because you want to pick a destination that's going to work for you. You want to try to organize it, and you don't want to lose access to your character for any portion of time. So at this point, it's all pretty much set up for you to do whatever you need to do to move your characters around.
Yeah. Next is actually something that I would love to see them implement in the live game, not just in Classic, is the Joyous Journeys Summer Experience buff event. And Kyvex just says, as we continue to work on Wrath of the Lich King Classic, we want to celebrate the defeat of Kil'jaeden and the Burning Legion again with a bit of a special event to help players get ready for their adventures in Northrend. In the coming weeks, we will implement a global buff that we're calling Joyous Journeys. During this time this buff is active, all sources of experience points will be awarded 50% additional experience. That's a 50% experience buff.
That's a lot of extra experience.
That's a lot of extra experience from all sources. This is everything. This isn't just quests. This isn't just killing mobs. This is everything. We haven't locked down the specific time frame for when this buff will activate, but we expect it will last at least 6 to 8 weeks, beginning a few weeks before the 3.4.0 pre-patch and persisting right up until the day Wrath of the Lich King Classic launches. This buff should provide a great opportunity for everyone who may have fallen behind the leveling curve, or anyone with alts they want to prep for the next adventure to jump in and get caught up to level 70 ahead of the release of Wrath of the Lich King Classic. This will also be active on Wrath of the Lich King Classic Fresh Start realms as well. So it should be a great jumpstart for any players who want to try leveling up quickly during pre-patch and participating in various Wrath pre-patch events, such as the Zombie Plague or special time limited bosses such as Balzathon in Stratholme and Tenris Mirkblood in Karazhan. While we aren't quite ready to announce specific dates around Wrath Classic, we felt it might be helpful to let you know ahead of time that this buff event was coming. We'll have more for you in the weeks around, more to share in the weeks around Wrath Classic launch plans in the coming weeks. Okay, so, man, oh man. I mean, yes, thank you to the Blizzard team for telling people about this ahead of time, because I guarantee you there's lots of people out there right now. I know a few who are leveling characters who are like, oh, I want to level up this particular class to play inside Wrath of the Lich King Classic, and just waiting a couple of weeks and getting a 50% experience buff and saving yourself a bunch of time, that's going to feel really good. So I know people who are waiting specifically for this because it's just going to feel way better to level up through that game, because they aren't looking for a classic experience for Burning Crusade. They just want to be prepped for Wrath. And so this allows them to be prepped for Wrath. So I would love to see this kind of thing come in at the tail end of expansions for live game. I'd love to see, like, right now, as we move into Season 4, them go, here's a 50% increased experience gain, level up all the characters you want, do what you want to do right now to prep yourself for Dragonflight and have fun inside Season 4. If you want to play other characters or classes in Season 4, this is the let's get silly, let's let everyone do this kind of period of time I think would be great to see in live game too. So pumped that they're doing this, excited for my friends over in the Classic community.
Yeah, this is great. It's kind of a surprise. Like, I didn't really think that they would do something like this. I agree that I would love to see something like this come to Shadowlands, like before the end, last, month or two before pre-patch, or even through pre-patch, like the last month and then the month of pre-patch. Like, it would be awesome just to kind of, get the whole stable up to 60 and ready to go. Yeah. But I mean, really, my thing is, I think once I get my Blood Elf Paladin project situated, I think I'm moving over to my Burning Crusade Classic Warrior and finally leveling up to 70. I mean, I played Burning Crusade for like 1 or 2 nights. Most people I play with did not follow suit. I really had no big pull to try to like find people to play with or whatever. I mean, keep in mind that Burning Crusade Classic launched very shortly after 9.1 did, and I was going pretty ham in Korthia for a few months. I was busy with retail, and it's like, this is not what I'm trying to do. I am increasingly less busy with retail, and even though I have no real desire to like commit time to Burning Crusade endgame before it's all said and done, an extra 50% to get my tune from like 60.5 to 70, that sure sounds good to me. So I think I will definitely take advantage of this. I would love to have my character max level before Wrath comes out. I don't know if I'm going to really spend any significant time in Wrath of the Lich King Classic, but I do feel like Wrath is more welcoming, I guess, to like a casual experience. There's just, there's so many different ways to engage with Wrath, and there's so many different paths to, reaching different goals, getting different rewards, that I feel like Wrath is potentially the version of like the very classic era of the game where you could just kind of dip a toe and do some stuff, and it could feel okay, right? Like even if you're not power gaming it, you might be able to get something out of it. So I don't know. I wouldn't say that I definitely won't play Wrath Classic more than I've played the previous 2 iterations, but I definitely want to have a max level character going in and see how it shakes out from there. I'm still kind of bemused that they're just patching over the Burning Crusade servers and that we're not going to get like a snapshot of Burning Crusade to live on. I assume that is based on what they see internally in terms of how people are engaging with stuff, though, right? Like I think that's part of the reason why Wrath is coming out so soon after Burning Crusade Classic in the first place. I mean, it's barely been a year now that Burning Crusade's been out. So if we pencil Wrath in for like October-ish, that was what, a good 16 months or something for TBC Classic to live and die, where on live servers it lasted for like 21 or 22 months.
Right.
It's just it was a much shorter lifespan in the Classic realm. So I then again, I do think Wrath is kind of the thing that a lot of people have been waiting for, kind of licking their chops, ready to play some Wrath again. And I mean, I didn't actually play any of the beta this past week, but I did load it up. And man, when you see that login screen come up and you hear the Wrath version of the title theme, and Syndragosa flies in and lands right in front of your buttons, it's just like, I don't know. I mean, Wrath was a special time for a lot of us who were playing back then, right? It was something we looked forward to so much. It was closing this loop on like Warcraft 3, going all the way back to Warcraft 3, which it's funny because at the time that was only like 4 years prior, and all this stuff. Even Wrath is now like 14 years old. It's just weird how time works like that. But it was a big moment for the game, and so it's natural to be excited about it coming back. And yeah, so I'm definitely going to take advantage of this XP buff, and then we'll see what happens. I don't think it's going to be like I'm maining Wrath, but I might be dipping more of a toe.
The login screens were much bigger of a deal back then, because when you actually got the game, you could install the game and you'd get the login screen, but then you have to wait for the servers to go up. So you'd essentially do all the discs, install the game would be all ready to go, and the login screen would pop up, and you watch the opening cinematic, and you'd be sitting there at the login screen waiting for servers to come up. So you just sit there and wait, and it was a much bigger deal. Where these days, you click play, and then it opens, puts you entirely past that screen, right to your character select screen. And so you sort of don't get that feeling as much until you're in that situation with maintenance, right? So,
or like you would have like if you remember like installing off of a disc or whatever, like it would have sort of like a recap of the storyline so far. Like it would introduce you to like story concepts of the expansion. There'd be like, illustration art and stuff, and that would display, and it was like a whole ritual you had to do. Yeah, and then you had to sit there and wait till they turn the servers on. It's not quite the same way anymore, is it?
No, a little bit more streamlined, I guess, is the way you'd say. But whether or not that it creates an experience for players as much as it used to, it is, I guess, up to interpretation on that one. But yeah, all right. Next little bit of news, also from Kyvax, is adjustments to dungeon creature behavior and group experience. And they say that one of the most common pieces of feedback they've received and observed is the concern about passive sales of boosting in dungeons and in-game service as an in-game services in-game. Basically boosting dungeons in-game in Burning Crusade. It often overpowers chat with advertisements and makes certain channels hard to use for their intended purpose. It's also no secret that the gold from many boosting groups is used for illicit activities, such as real money transactions, as much of the gold that players pay to boosters is then sold for real money back to other players. Now that we've seen the final major content release of Burning Crusade Classic, we will soon adjust the behavior of creatures in most dungeons, including the new dungeons coming in Wrath of Lich King Classic, to make it significantly more difficult to endlessly snare and kite enemies. Additionally, we will implement a reduction in group experience earned when there is a large disparity between players' levels in the same group. We've experimented with similar changes to most dungeons on our Season of Mastery servers, and we found these changes to be very effective at reducing the efficiency of boosting groups We plan to roll out these achievements to Burning Crusade Classic Realms at the same time as the Joyous Journeys experience buff, which should happen sometime in the next several weeks, so stay tuned for more information about that and when you can expect to see these changes hit live servers. This is also a good opportunity to remind everyone that spamming chat channels with advertisements for boosting services outside of dedicated trade chat channels is against terms of service. And you should take every opportunity to report players you see advertising for boosting services in channels such as General and Looking For Group. And also be really ultimately cautious if you're ever considering spending gold on a boosting service, because they aren't always telling the truth. And we actually ran into a bit of a alliance side mythic rating debate that took place this past week, where on live servers there's been, as we've talked about on the show for several weeks now, this like perpetual spamming of fake advertising and just basically conning people out of their gold, and advertising as raid teams who are in Hall of Fame, and those particular raid teams, and basically people give money to these totally unknown accounts and then reach out to the raid leader or the guild leader and go, hey, when's my run? And the guild leader's like, I don't know who you are or who you gave gold to, but that wasn't for us. We don't even do these. And it, someone was out, I think 600K or something like that this past week. And it sparked a whole other discussion as to what could be done or how we could handle this sort of stuff. Because I think some of the leaders of the groups are starting to feel a little bit responsible, or at least guilty / I guess just feel for the people who are being conned and want to find a way to like anti-advertise, just figure something out to sort of contradict some of the stuff that's going on. So we'll see how all that pans out on live servers. But in Burning Crusade, it remains a problem. And I think the Joyous Journeys XP buff will actually help with this, because it's such an easier way for players to level characters that they might not lean on boosting services as much. And then I think it just makes sense to be like, hey, you know what? If you have 3 max level characters dragging a level 1 or level 2 through dungeons, that level 1, level 2 is not going to get a lot of experience. You're basically going to have to run this person for substantially longer time to be able to actually get this done. And I don't think the person's going to want to pay for a boost that takes a week to do versus just leveling the character in 4 days on their own.
Yeah, and it's probably not really worth the time of the boosters either.
Exactly.
I mean, boosting is a big problem when it comes to stuff like this, especially in Classic. It's something I've heard so many people complain about over the last few years, and it's kind of inevitable, right? Like, there have always been black markets around WoW since the beginning for anything like this, and yeah, it can result in really bad experiences for people who are buying into it or whatever. There are reasons why Blizzard doesn't want people doing it, aside from, I don't know, the engagement, I guess, that they're potentially missing out on by you spending more time to do it yourself. Like, it's a giant problem for customer service potentially. So yeah, I mean, they obviously, Randy mentions that, they've experimented with this kind of idea on Season Mastery, and they're kind of happy with the results. That's kind of cool, like proof of concept for Season of Mastery, because you can do stuff like that in sort of a smaller way and gauge the impact of it. So I don't know. I mean, the whole thing with boosting services and in-game advertising is not going away, unfortunately. And there's no like magic button that Blizzard can push to make it go away, really. I mean, maybe there might be some, but the most obvious ones all seem pretty terrible for the game overall. Like, they can make it so you just can't like move gold between accounts or something, but it doesn't. I think that diminishes the gameplay experience for everybody more significantly than the advertisements and the boosting services themselves. So I don't know. I mean, hopefully, it seems like in this particular instance, this should relieve some of that pressure, because they're doing it at the same time that they're adding in a huge XP buff. What is the benefit at that point to trying to get involved with a boosting service or whatever? You're not getting anything for your time or your currency investment, and you could just be playing the game and enjoying yourself at your own pace. So I don't know. This is just like a never-ending battle for them.
Yeah.
But keep in mind, I guess, if you have been doing this on Burning Crusade Classic, if you've been making gold run people through dungeons, like, it's probably going to dry up in the next couple weeks here.
Yeah. Okay, as far as notable hotfixes go for the live game, Guardian Druids got a little buff. They basically wanted to be sure the Guardian Druids were sort of not falling behind on damage with Demon Hunters. So they gave them a little buff. They then buffed Demon Hunters as well to sort of make sure that Demon Hunters were still feeling good and on the same playing field. So that happened too. Warlocks saw themselves a buff for Affliction, but then some Destro nerfs. The nerfs to Destro actually are... It's raising some debate because there's certainly a side of the community that's like, hey, they need to do changes and do hotfixes to the game and tuning to the game much more frequently than they currently do. I'm certainly on that side of, I think, like every 2 weeks to every 3 weeks, we should actually see a pass across characters for balance and tuning to sort of try and get people in line and make sure that severe outliers like Warlocks are not something that just rampage through 3 months of the expansion, which is basically what's happened so far, as Warlocks have just sat as kings in 2 specs. Basically, 2 of their DPS specs are the top 2 DPS specs in the game for 3.5 months, and I think that's ridiculous. So they basically gave them a nerf. They are still the best DPS class in the game with this nerf. As an FYI, for those who are curious, they're still kings. They're still on top. But they did tweak them down a little bit. It's like, oh, as opposed to being 40% of everyone else in DPS, you'll be 25 to 20% ahead of everybody else in DPS. You're like, oh, okay. So yeah, that was the Warlock nerf stuff that happened. As you said,
yeah, I mean, think about that. Like, I feel like it's a bit of a rework in some ways. Like, they're trying to funnel more damage into stuff that they have to like target at a particular enemy or something, and they're trying to rearrange that pie chart of where the damage goes to some degree.
Sure.
And it's like, doesn't it just feel like way too late into the process?
Way too late
doing this. Like, maybe just buff other classes' numbers, just raw buffs for them, and try to catch everybody up instead of trying to shuffle around Destro Lock this much. I don't know. It seems a little drastic for this late in the process.
The reason why I don't dig too much into that is because we're about to hit Season 4 and everyone's about to get a really huge eye level boost, which is going to really bork things to a certain degree. So I don't, they know the Season 4 numbers from them doing their internal testing. So my assumption is that they have been playing around with Warlocks and decided that this is the route they want to go, and that disparity that exists might become less of a disparity once everyone else starts getting these higher item level items. And maybe, as you know, classes scale better with haste than others, and now you have a higher budget that you can get in haste, so that then cranks your class into a position where they're actually competing with these other classes that have been kings for the past 3 and a bit months.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised to see like a big round of tuning changes, class tuning in Season 4 also. So I don't know, maybe they're just getting out, as you kind of allude to, maybe they're getting out in front of something else. But
yeah,
it does seem weird. Like, this seems like relatively big changes to Destruction's priorities and stuff, and I don't play Warlock. So maybe I'm just looking at it because there's a lot of line items here in a developer's note, and I'm kind of like trying to read between the lines.
Right.
So maybe I'm overestimating like how big of a change this is to Destro play overall, but it just seems like it seems like a lot of changes for a patch that's been out since February.
Yeah, no, agreed.
A year that's been out since March, and where everybody's been kind of locked into it for so long. It's like, I don't know. Is this really necessary at this point in time? Versus, I generally don't like it when something is strong and they kind of try to rein it back in with the pack instead of just boosting other specs up to try to compete more on that level. I prefer the buff route overall, and I don't know. I know they want the game to be challenging, but we're in the tail end here.
Well, yeah, I think the amount of changes that took place just emphasized to me that these are probably changes that have been sitting on a whiteboard for a long time, and they just keep adding to and adding to and adding to, going, when are we going to do this? When is this going to happen? And you're like, yeah, this feels like 12 weeks worth of hotfixes happening at once to one class, right? Like,
it kind of does, yeah.
Yeah. So I would like to see them just do every, at least once a month, if not twice a month, go through and do a pass, whether it's even a 0.8% change here and a 1% change there, whatever it is. I think they do need to look at classes and start tuning them and balancing them more progressively and more actively. I wouldn't have an issue with them going, hey, you know what? We're going to buff Boomkins by 3%, and then 2 weeks later they go, that was too much. We're going to nerf them by 1.5. That's fine.
Right,
because if it means that we're all sort of sitting in a reasonably competitive spot and there isn't just this class is 40% ahead of everybody else, then great. that's great.
Yeah, and I mean this tier specifically, like you just kind of made me think of this. They took a really sort of a gradual approach with some underperforming specs, and they would buff something here and there by like 4% overall. Thinking of like Outlaw Rogue, Windwalker Monk, they just goose them just a little bit. Just move that knob a hair and see how it goes. And then they did that 2 or 3 times. And then, that paid real dividends to those specs eventually.
Yeah.
But, in this case, you look at like the other side of that and it's like, okay, well, we're going to rework kind of the priority system for this spec. And then we're going to we realize that this is going to be like an AoE damage loss. So we're going to buff a bunch of stuff by 20%.
Yeah,
it seems just very reactionary is the word that comes to mind. It's not really correct, but you know what I mean. It seems very dramatic compared to the other kind of relatively conservative buffs and reworks and stuff we've seen over the course of this 9.2 era.
Yep. Well, apparently they still have issues with Test Greymane as well. Test Greymane was showing up inside of the Rogue Hall twice, and now Test Greymane isn't showing up inside of the Hall of Shadows, and so Test is just going rogue, if you will.
This cracked me up, because last week we were talking about, there was a hotfix note that they fixed an issue where you would see 2 Test Greymanes in the Hall of Shadows.
Yeah.
They didn't specify how they fixed it in the note, though.
Yeah.
And apparently the fix was that you didn't see Test Greymane at all. So, apparently, as of last week, there should be 1 Test Greymane.
There should be 1 Test Greymane in the Hall of Shadows. And then, of course, we mentioned top of the show, the whole Andros fixes that went through. It's supposed to be like several issues with environment disappearing during the encounter is supposed to be resolved. They fixed an issue causing players to be unable to pick up the Earthbreaker charges immediately after recovering from effects of Pod Tender. So there's like a couple of fixes still happening there. Yet to be seen if that actually resolves what's going on there. I will report back next week, not this week, when we get back in and see it again.
Yeah,
who knows? As far as player versus player goes, they did actually fix a thing with Balance Druid, where apparently our Celestial Pillar from our 2-set bonus could break players from stealth. That's not a bug to fix. That is fine. It should. It's an AoE spell that's doing damage inside an area. You should get broken out of stealth.
If you're stealth and you're walking into AoE, then you should take damage and be not stealth. I mean, that's the way a lot of that behavior has worked traditionally, but yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand that one. That was one of the ones where I was like, I mean, if it's somehow targeting players in stealth and casting on them, that's a problem. But if it's...
Right, yeah, I can't do that. Yeah, if it's like cleaving off of a stealth target or something, no. But
but I don't understand if it's like if I cast this on if this procs on a healer and their druid or rogue happens to be standing too close to them, it should pop them out of stealth. That should happen. It should be a thing. And they also did a lot of tuning passes with healers inside PvP, as well as a whole bunch of passes with Retribution Paladin. They did some Hunter tuning. They did some Shadow Priest tuning. We got some Outlaw Rogue stuff. We got Warrior stuff. We got Warlock stuff. They just went to town. So if you're someone who does a bunch of PvP, be sure you're checking the hotfix notes for this week, because some things got tweaked, and you're going to want to know which those things are that affected your class in particular.
I can't speak intelligently to any of these changes because I haven't participated in PvP, but there was a lot. So, you might want to, if you are PvPing with some, regularity and you haven't been in, to look at the notes lately. This stuff is not live as we record this, neither this nor the PvE Nerfs bus we were talking about, but with regional resets this week, it will be live. So in NA, we're looking at tomorrow after maintenance. But as of right now, these changes are not in the game.
Yeah. And then last but not least, actually a fairly hot button topic that came up. They fixed an issue with the user interface that allowed people's field of view to be increased past 90. And what this means is you could pull your camera back really far, like almost strategic game mode far. Like you could actually, it's like you're playing a strategy game, World of Warcraft game, that distance. And Initially, this was a field of view restriction was supposed to be set into the game to alleviate motion sickness. Basically, if you pull back far enough, you don't notice, it doesn't affect you as much. So they wanted to be able to allow people to adjust that field of view range. They didn't intend to allow players to be able to adjust it as far as they could actually adjust it to when they were when players were actually doing it initially. And so they hotfixed this to set the restriction back and basically get people back into playing World of Warcraft from the normal perspective as opposed to from this incredibly zoomed back perspective. And this sparked a lot of talk around the community because people are kind of like, why not let people zoom back this far? What is the problem with allowing people to play this zoom back? If this is what the player base wants, why are you taking it away? So there's a lot of discussion that's happened around that. I personally am someone who feels like if developers didn't want players to zoom back that far, they would add more trees to fights like they did on the first boss of Spires. Because that's the easiest way to guarantee someone doesn't zoom their camera back far, is you can't see because all these trees lean over the stupid fight. And it's super irritating.
First person.
Yeah. So
yeah.
That to me is a way where if there was encounters where they didn't want people to zoom back really far, put in structures that lean over the fight that are high enough up that when you zoom back past a certain point, you're actually obstructing your view, and it's just not the right way to play. But that would also allow you to do more fun things. Why take away something that, like on Halandris, for example, it'd be really cool to be able to zoom your camera back pretty far. It's a ginormous space. Wouldn't it be neat to be able to see more of that space and more of that fight as it's happening? I think that'd be a really cool encounter for that. And being able to zoom your camera really far back doesn't actually help you at all in that fight, in the sense that it doesn't do something that gives you an edge or an advantage or breaks a mechanic inside of that encounter. It just makes people be able to play the game the way they want to play the game. If they want to see more of the encounter, they can. They can see their whole team. I mean, imagine what players can do with that from a like video creation, like a machinima kind of point of view, be able to zoom stuff back that far and be able to see whole armies or whole boss encounters taking place and record the whole thing as opposed to popping between different players' perspectives to try and make that happen. So I feel overall like it's unfortunate that this isn't something that they put into the game. I think it should be. I think they should be able to put your camera that far. And that from a developer's point of view, if you're looking at having encounters where you're like, no, we want this to feel like a closed-in, tight encounter. We don't want players to be able to zoom back that far for whatever future encounter mechanic exists where you want it to be close. Put in, work with the environment team, work with the people who are designing the room, and put in some sort of, obstruction that sticks out, that makes it not a good way to play the game. Put in a bubble that once you scroll out far enough, you just can't see your character because you have this dome over the encounter that you're zooming out of. And so you have to stay zoomed in a certain distance, otherwise this dome's there. Like, you can do those things to limit, the what the player can do. Again, I feel like this sort of echoes back to the Dreadlords encounter, where they designed a really cool encounter as far as like on paper, but in execution, they didn't give players the tools they needed to be able to do the encounter well. And so it became an irritating fight. Something like removing health bars the moment you go into that phase of, who's mind controlled would have been a really nice touch where, hey, you know what? We designed this cool encounter and we worked with the UI team so that when this thing happens in this encounter, your UI adapts in this way, which is the best sort of a way to help you to do it. Why not do that, right? Why not have people who are developing fights work with the other teams? And they might already, but it seems like this is clearly an issue. Work with other teams more to be able to incorporate what's best for the player experience in that encounter, right? And I think, unfortunately, taking away something like this doesn't help players have the best experience.
Yeah, something about this doesn't add up to me, because what they said was they put the console command in to change your field of view in 925 to assist with motion sickness.
Yep.
And they also say that like the default field of view has always been 90, and they didn't intend to allow you to set it above 90. Now, I'm not sure how narrowing the field of view, I'm not an expert on like motion sickness or like how games induce that, but I do know that I prefer a wider field of vision. My display that I play World of Warcraft on is a lot wider than it was when the default of 90 for the field of vision was established.
Yep.
I feel like this is okay on like modern displays, and also like people that I do know who who I've played with over the years who've had issues with motion sickness or being nauseated or something from, some element of World of Warcraft, they prefer a wider view. They prefer a farther out zoom. I remember, when they cut down the max camera zoom when Legion was coming out, I had a longtime guildie and a friend that was concerned that they were going to have to stop playing because the new max distance was way too close for them to be comfortable.
Yeah, it was 120 before is what it originally was, I believe.
Yeah, so like I'm not sure how, I'm not sure how being able to set the field of vision from 90 to 50 is an accessibility win across the board for motion sickness. I mean, for some players, maybe the narrower field helps, but for some players, it certainly doesn't, at least in my personal experience, as anecdotal as it may be. So something about the rationale here is strange. And then something about the fact that it went out to live with the ability to set it to 120 is strange because they had to know that they did that, right? Or like, I don't know. Maybe it's something in the code somewhere that says that, it functions up to 120, but players are only allowed to set it at 90, and they just missed the part where they were going to restrict the players from opening it up. I think WoW is playable for the most part with the field of vision set to 90. But yeah, part of it is it sort of creates it does create some design concerns because if you a console command that allows you to see more of the world around you than a player who doesn't, you now potentially have a competitive advantage.
Right.
And even if you don't like the bird's eye view of the game and this super wide panorama of the game, and you want to be more, closer to the environment, closer to your character and other characters around you, you are playing the game wrong if you are not at least, when it matters in combat or whatever, zoomed all the way out. There are, you mentioned what are essentially design concerns, right? They can design their way out of that being a competitive advantage. I think like in some ways they've made PvE combat, a lot more readable over the years. They've included some elements like putting, hard edges on cone attacks and other things that you're not supposed to stand in. They have that, I call it a kill Jaden spike because it's the first thing I can ever really remember them using it on, but they have things indicate whether something's being soaked or not, or, if it needs to be soaked and it isn't, then you can clearly see that. They've added a lot of stuff to make combat readable. And I think, if you don't want players to get upset when you accidentally give them the ability to have a much broader view of the game world, and then you take it away in a couple of days, then the answer is it's a design problem, and you need to make sure that stuff reads well and fits into, the area that you're giving players to use. I mean, Halandris is a great example because that's a pretty difficult fight to tank with the tools that we have available to see the world around us. You have to line up the laser beam that Halandris shoots at you at a thing that's behind you, and the game doesn't really make it easy for you to see stuff that's behind you by default, right? And that thing might be pretty far behind you, where having like a more zoomed out camera or a wider field of vision would really help. So, those are just some kind of things just with the, the game that we're playing right now that I think of when it comes to this stuff. I guess if the decision is like, listen, the field of vision has to be 90 because this is what we're designing players to play with this, so that's the expectation, then fine. I can live with that, make combat read well inside that field. And I don't know if somehow it helps you to play with a much narrower field to avoid motion sickness, and then you need to make combat readable for that too, because I'm not sure that it helps the player who is now not nauseated but also can't see what they're doing. Like you're accommodating them in some way, but making the game not playable for them. So I don't know. Everything about this has been a strange roller coaster for me. I mean, I guess it really was only a couple days there. It sort of became publicized. I think it was Ironic or something tweeted about it, that it was a console command that you could do this with. And then everybody did it for 2 days. And then they said, hey, we're hot fixing this. And here's why.
Yeah.
It was just one of those things. One thing I do want to point out about hotfixes last week you'll notice an omission. Or not an omission, I guess, as much as something that hasn't been included yet, which is the Hunter auto shot bug.
Oh, did they actually resolve that thing?
I don't know. They haven't published anything
okay.
about it. We got that blue post from Linksy 2 weeks ago that was like, yeah, we're working on it. Still hasn't showed up. So as far as I know, it still exists, which is funny because I figured that since they got out in front of it and were telling us that they were working on it, that a fix was imminent, but maybe not.
Maybe not. I agree with the points you made about the being able to zoom out past 90. I certainly agree with the if you're gonna limit it to 90, and if the intention of this is that people who have motion sickness can play more, zoomed in, then you need to design things around people being more zoomed in. And your Holandris example is perfect in the sense of like, if you could have zoomed out farther, it would have like I know many tanks who, whenever they were doing that line, would spin their camera so that they could see behind themselves to be able to make sure they're lining it up properly while facing the boss. Like
you have to, or you'll miss.
Exactly. So it doesn't make sense to do that on that encounter. Like I would almost be interesting to be like, on these encounters, you can set your view distance farther. Like that would almost be an interesting thing. Like again, I talk about the encounter design team working with the other design teams on these encounters to actually like make fights more accessible in this way. And that would be a great way to do it, is be like, hey, on this encounter, when this ability goes on you, your camera is automatically pulled back. That's something that happens.
Yeah.
Right? And you're like, oh, okay, how does this feel for players? We can beta test this. We can do all the testing for it to see if this is way too disruptive or whether this feels great to be like, hey, guess what? You get pulled back to like 150 distance whenever this ability happens so that you can actually position yourself just the way you need to be to line it up on this thing. Now, does that mean that it's harder to see stuff around your feet? Sure, it might mean that, but let's not put an ability that drops on your feet while this other mechanic's happening, right? You control the timings.
Right.
So, like there's ways to accommodate this that I just feel like aren't being explored. And I'm getting a little bit tired, I think, after this raid tier of going, why is it that we aren't asking for more from our encounter designers to work with these other departments for things like, or why are we not asking more from these other departments, I guess, too, or just Blizzard in general, to produce fights where it feels like the encounter's cool and the mechanics that they make challenge players with actually have UI designed around them. Hey, we're going to make everyone in your raid become enemies, and you have to identify which two of these raid members are bad guys and actually vote on them or choose to target the correct ones to kill them. How about we put some sort of voting system into this? We're basing this off of the Among Us game. That's what it's based off of in the first place, where literally you go to a screen and you vote on players. Why are we not building in a UI element that lets players do that? Like, you designed a cool fight, but the fight just feels like it's the encounter without the interface that needs to go with it. And I want that from raiding encounters in WoW going forward. I want them to come up with a really cool, unique idea and deliver players the tools they need to be able to enjoy that experience. Not to have players required to use exterior add-ons to efficiently do something. That's just like I as much as I love add-ons and I think they're a great addition to World of Warcraft and really important, I do feel like Blizzard could easily produce a better user interface to accommodate a cool design element like the Among Us phase, which would remove the need for the add-on. Because the first add-on that came out, the first week that came out, solved it for you instantly. It solved it. And they're like, oh, we got to break that. That's terrible. Mm-hmm. And you're like, okay, well then why didn't you come up with something? Like,
right, yeah. The actual game doesn't support any decent way to do the mechanic. Yeah. And I think that can go for something a bit more esoteric, like the Among Us phase in Lords of Dread, or it can just go for the space that combat is taking place in, like Holandris. Hey, Lords of Dread actually has problems with the arena too. Yeah. In terms of sight lines and stuff, especially if you're tanking.
Yeah.
You mentioned First Boss and Spires of Ascension, another great example. Like these are all elements of kind of the same issue, which is like combat readability and just what the game is asking of players to accomplish. I feel like you do have to swing for the fences sometimes. You got to make designs that are cool and interesting, but the game has to support it too in a material way. And I don't know, if it can't, then I feel like when they break add-ons, they should draw the line at like stuff that automates,
Sure.
controlling your character. And if it's not doing that, then just let it go. I don't know. That's kind of where I land with that stuff. I think if, the Lords of Dread is a perfect example. It's a very esoteric mechanic, and it's very hard to do without, multiple other tools, voice chat or some other kind of way to communicate outside of the game. Plus, maybe some in-game stuff to point out targets or something, to some way to communicate. Like, I just feel like that's a really tough spot to put players in and then say, no, your add-ons are too good, we have to break them.
Well, I feel like every time Blizzard breaks an add-on, like the Among Us one, for example, there should be, I feel at least there should be an internal meeting going, now, why did we have to break this add-on? What design-wise was this add-on accomplishing that our interface failed to do? So players felt it was necessary to do this, right? Because it's not, players are lazy, so they just want to, it's like, no, there's clearly something that players aren't enjoying or finding challenging about this. So they've developed an add-on to help them accomplish this goal. Now, what is it that we did that left the encounter in a position where players felt this was necessary? And something like automating, telling you which one's, right or wrong, I agree with breaking that add-on. I don't think that should have been the way to do it. But the other add-ons everyone used after that was voting on people and actually being able to vote on character frames or vote on your raid frames. Like there were different add-ons that allowed you to do those things. Different weak cores allowed you to do those things. So why is it that players had to be the ones to essentially complete the encounter design on this to be able to accomplish the encounter? It doesn't make sense. Right. And I would hope that there'd be internal conversations around, yep, we failed on this aspect of this encounter design. How can we ensure this doesn't happen again? I don't know. I just hope going forward in Dragonflight, we can still see really cool, unique encounters like Dreadlords, but with the whole package, not just 80% of it, right? Not just the fight without an UI.
I can't imagine those conversations don't happen, but I think the problem is because when you do design like a wacky fight, maybe it's like hard to foresee, I don't know, ultimately what's going to happen. Well, they put that post out a few weeks ago where they said that they tested it internally without voice chat and they thought it was fine.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I don't know how to respond to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just want to break in here with a little bit of breaking news about the conversation we're just having about tuning.
Sure.
A blue post just came through as we're live here, where Blizzard says that they are not going to make the changes to Destruction Warlock this week, and that they will adjust Destruction and Survival Hunter at the beginning of Season 4.
So, okay. Well,
there you go. And I think that's a good decision. I'm happy with that. I feel like this is a strange time to be, really changing up a playstyle and priorities and damage output for a particular spec. Season 4 seems like a natural time to do it. So you could breathe a sigh of relief, Destro Warlocks, and I guess enjoy it while you can. Season 4 is going to be a big reset, I think, for a lot of specs probably. So we'll be in a different landscape for a bit, but for the rest of the season, you can keep doing what you're doing.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so we have this post from the Community Council forums, and it is going to take a little bit to get through, but I think it's worth going a little bit over today to get through it, to be able to cover it on this episode. And it's thoughts on Realm Consolidation, all right? This comes from Agrend. It's the WoW Classic game producer. And Jason, do you want to talk a little bit about what the initial post encapsulated and how this response looks?
Yeah, sure. I mean, basically, as you can imagine, a user on the Community Council forums posted like, hey, I have some concerns and questions about how these decisions were made for Realm Consolidation. There are what seem to be low population servers that are not included in the consolidation, which seems to be like, sort of the goal, right? You figure that low pop servers would be the targets. Some concerns about faction balance, or like moving a faction, alliance from one server to another server, and horde from that same server to a different server, and asking about, faction only character moves, asking about Season of Mastery and how that's going to be impacted by, potential server consolidation, and concerns about, the 2-week character lockout for things that don't move. questions about guilds and guild banks and all that stuff. The duplicate name issue. These are all things that sort of, I think these are natural questions for players to have when Blizzard says, hey, we're going to kill this server dead. Like, the server's being unplugged. So get what you need out of here before, August. I think these are pretty natural concerns to have. I think some of these things, occurred to me. Some of them are a bit in the weeds in terms of like the actual classic experience that I'm not having. So, the post was really detailed about like specific concerns about the process and about how Blizzard arrived at the decisions to consolidate what they're going to do and what the plan's going to be moving forward. And Agron's answers were pretty detailed here. It gives a really good overview of this whole process, what their kind of expectations are, and what players can expect as a result, and how they sort of arrived at these decisions. I mean, this is really the first time in WoW's history we've ever seen anything like this, right? Like, we've seen, realm connections and stuff in retail, several times over the years, but, they sort of drew a line in the sand at like turning servers off. But in Classic, like, these servers are going to go away. As far as we know, they're going away forever as of August, that's unprecedented. So I'm glad that, we got some insight into the decision-making process here.
Yeah. So like overall, this process that we get is going to be new for Blizzard as well. Basically, they say low population servers not included. There are a few servers that are not included in the realm consolidations, but in my opinion, probably should be. Mainly Razorgore, Earth Fury, Old Blanchy, and these are EU and US East and US West. Arguably extends to bigger servers like Ashbringer EU and Azure Song US West. There are several factors that went into the process to select which servers were going to be retired, but mostly we use data around the daily average WoW population, or the DAW, which I think is awesome that they have their own little daily average WoW population that they chose to include in there, that we track internally. There was specific thresholds that we looked at, and if over a certain period of time a realm was under that DAW threshold, we added the realm to the list of servers to be consolidated. In other words, they set benchmarks, and if those benchmarks weren't met by those servers, then they decided, okay, we should probably get rid of this server and consolidate it into another server.
Right, it's based on like activity on a daily basis more so than like total population of a realm or something. Which, I mean, I don't know. To me, that makes sense as far as what to monitor, right? Like, if one server was hot for a 1 month at launch because a community moved over there and farted around with Burning Crusade Classic for a month, and there's thousands of tunes on it that never get logged into. Is that a high pop server or is it a low pop server, or should it or should not be considered for consolidation? And it's like, I think looking at it on a curve of like, daily average players, daily average users probably makes sense as a metric to track for like, should the server continue to exist or not?
Yeah. And just so, another little insight they throw in here that I think is great, because we see this on Live Realms as well, is they use a similar number and threshold for enabling free character moves off of a realm. So if they're deciding whether or not they should do free character moves, they also look at the DAW for those servers and basically set a threshold. And if the servers don't meet those thresholds, they look at doing free character transfers. So that's another little tidbit we got. Another factor that led to them being super aggressive when it comes to consolidating all the lower population realms has to do with upcoming release of Wrath Classic. As was the case at the end of Burning Crusade Classic, we expect a significant increase in players joining and rejoining the game, and we definitely want to make sure everyone who wants to play Wrath Classic has a place to do so, preferably with multiple options in their chosen rule set that aren't experiencing heavy queues or are layered. So again, like them bringing back the importance of, we don't want to be layering these realms. We don't want people waiting 8 hours to get onto their server. So, as much as we're removing servers, we also want to make sure that by removing and consolidating these servers, we are still able to accommodate the Wrath Classic launch, which is going to be the highest point you're going to see any engagement on Wrath at any point throughout any of this, because there's going to be tons of people checking it out, even just for the first week and then not touching it again. Like that happens in that first week of launch. So I expect that they're also considering that the whole time as well.
Right, yeah, and if you have a low pop realm that has like a decently active daily population, then maybe that's a good place to kind of grow a Wrath realm, sort of. Like, I guess if players really enjoy like a very low population experience, then that might be troubling to them, right? But yeah, I'm glad that they're expecting a significant increase in players for Wrath. I assume they're going to get one. Maybe it's a very short-term thing, but like, yeah, they have to be ready for that. And if you look at like a total threshold of like, okay, this many characters exist on this realm, therefore it is low pop, so we should shut it off. You might just be setting yourself up for huge problems in the initial wake of Wrath coming out.
Yeah. And they say they're still working through where exactly these realms' remaining population should end up. I think it's safe to say that we are unlikely to move these populations onto realms you listed above, but rather onto realms with much higher active populations. In other words, if you're someone who doesn't choose which server you're going to, they're still sort of working out where everyone's going to just end up with these extra characters that didn't move, that they've asked people to move. But it's pretty likely to expect these characters are going to be dumped onto much higher active population realms. Because they want to sort of encourage people to see other people when they play the MMO game. So yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, it's kind of essential part of the process, right? So yeah, I mean, I would imagine that they'll probably announce where they're going to do the auto moves like much closer to the actual thing happening. And part of that I would assume will involve like paying attention to where people are moving to already. Right, because you have the ability to move off of these realms that are not long for this world, so that might influence the final decision as we get closer.
Yeah, and they still haven't decided exactly how merging the factions would work on servers, as far as like, if this is a heavily alliance favored server, do they try and dump enough horde onto that server to sort of balance it out? But at the end of the day, the best way to ensure that a player on one of these soon-to-be retired realms ends up on the best possible destination for them is for that individual to take advantage of the free character moves that are being offered right now and will be offered right up until August 9th when they kick off the whole process. So, in other words, if you're someone who's like, hey, I don't want to be an alliance player who's dumped onto a heavy horde-dominated realm, move your character now or before August 9th to ensure that you don't, right? Like, that's going to be part of it. So, certainly keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, and I mean, we know from kind of previous blue posts and community council discussions they've had and stuff that they don't mind it when there's sort of an organic faction imbalance on a realm, because players actually prefer that. Like, what, from the data they have over the years, what players like is to be on a realm that is at least like slightly favored for their faction. Yeah. So if you try to even all that up with like auto moves, then you might create a situation that a lot of players don't like. But, they've also given you 2 months here to pick your destination and get off of these realms. So, yeah, I don't know. It's just really not a situation you want to end up in. Don't let them do it for you.
Yeah. And they did acknowledge that they've thought about like actual faction character migrations happening. And it's something they wouldn't mind exploring, but it's likely to be available. It's not likely to be available in the near term. As it stands, free character moves are sort of an all or nothing affair. And while we'd prefer not to enable them on realms with a healthy population on at least one side and potentially cause a cascade effect that causes damage to a said healthy population, which just enforces what you just went over of people like being the favored faction on a realm, turning on faction character moves, basically saying, hey, all the horde players on this particular server can move on to this alliance favored server if they want for free, and have this massive cascade of horde suddenly dump onto that server and just mess up the healthy population, is not something that they necessarily want to mess with. So they're looking at it though, so it's potential down the line.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's the kind of thing that seems to make sense from the outside. Like, well, you want 50-50 on every server, but I don't think in practice that is actually what you want, and I don't think it's what players respond to. And yeah, if you have a realm that has like a faction imbalance, but has like, a healthy amount of daily engagement, players are logging in and participating in things on the realm together or whatever, then yeah, just influencing one faction to either leave or join that realm is probably fixing what isn't really broken. if you know you're the minority faction on your realm, especially in these very realm centric versions of the game, then I mean you can move if you need to, if you feel like that's important to your experience, or you can kind of embrace that you're the underdog faction on the server or whatever. This is sort of just the organic growth of the game over time, and it's especially pronounced in these versions of the game because the realm is so important. I think it makes sense. The explanation makes sense that you don't want to influence players to sort of upset a stable realms faction balance.
Right.
It's sort of like an emergency ripcord to allow players to keep enjoying the game and to move out of a situation that is unhealthy.
Yeah. And there's another sort of just an important note for players who might be wondering about this that comes up in here around Season of Mastery. There was a question asked about whether or not we'd see realm consolidations or this type of stuff happen in Season of Mastery, and just the nature of the fact that Season of Mastery was designed to sort of permanently close at a certain point and was designed around those populations sort of being ended by the servers closing. They're not going to do a consolidation or something with Season of Mastery. It is its own little lifespan. It's a season, and when the season ends, and that's what it was entitled for. So, just as a FYI, if you're a Season of Mastery player, expect that the Season of Mastery will end, and it will end, and that'll be it, and it'll be over, and you're not going to get consolidated with lower pop and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and I'm trying to remember if that's actually been spelled out before previously. I can't remember if the last time we got some blue text about what was going to happen with Season of Mastery realms, if it was definitive or if it was kind of nebulous. I can't remember. This is pretty clear cut. Like, those realms are not going to exist once Season of Mastery ends. So, I think the messaging around those realms was specifically like, this is a seasonal experience. Like, you're not going to be able to move characters off of there or something, if I remember correctly. So, it is what it is. It's a much different experiment for WoW to have a realm that kind of lives and dies in a very short cycle. But if there were dead Season of Mastery realms right now, so be it, because they're all going away when the season wraps up.
Yeah. Now, the next chunk of stuff here is actually really, really important information, okay? The first thing they say is, I do want to clarify that characters on destination realms that we are consolidating characters onto will not experience any interruption in access to the characters at all. The only characters that might not be accessible for that 2-week period of time are characters currently on realms that are about to be retired. In other words, if you move, you're not going to experience any interruption. But if you're being moved onto a server, if you're somebody who lives on that server and all these characters being moved on, you still shouldn't experience an interruption. There shouldn't be something that happens when this migration happens that then locks you out of your character just because other people are moving onto your server. So keep that in mind. The next huge thing, this is a really, really, really important thing. Guilds, and by extension guild banks, will not survive this process and should be emptied out well ahead of time. In other words, if you're like, hey, will my entire guild just get moved over to this other server and by extension our guild bank and everything? No, it won't. If you have a guild bank, you want to distribute its materials around characters and move those characters all over together and then reform your guild on that new server, because your guild is not surviving this retirement process. I assume that is just a technological barrier that they have with the design of the game. So if you are someone who is moving from one of these servers that's retiring, figure out your guild stuff ahead of this happening, because you're going to want to do that. And that also means if you have a guild that you want to name a certain thing, go and claim that name, because you might not be able to on some servers. If you're really attached to a particular name for your guild, you might want to check out which of the servers you can migrate to have that name available. So just keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, I feel like this is maybe a bit under publicized. Like,
yeah.
I don't think that this was in the initial realm consolidation announcement. So I hope they hammer this a bit more in the lead up to it happening, because you might have a lot of stuff in your guild bank that you don't want to have disappear because you had to move servers. Like, that's pretty reasonable, I think, to expect that there are going to be players that fall into that category. So, yeah, it seems like the tech just isn't there to allow it to be ported like that. So, kind of unfortunate, because that's a lot of logistical overhead for players that are affected. But you have time, I guess, is the big thing.
Yeah, Who will get to keep duplicate names? Reasonable question to ask. The characters on the destination realms will retain their name, and the incoming character from the other realm will be flagged for a rename. In other words, first come, first serve. That's how this works. If you were the first person on the server that you're going to have that name, you retain your name. The new person coming in will be flagged for a rename. This is an unfortunate thing because a lot of people have a lot of player identity. I know you like even having the bail gun after your name because it's been such an OG thing for you. But this is something that you got to be ready for as well. And again, just like with the guilds, maybe log onto the server, see if the name's available, make a character now so it's saved, and then work out your transfer over, delete the character when you transfer so that you don't get flagged for that rename. You actually have the name you want on that new server. So just keep that in mind when you're doing this. And yeah,
it's just like, I mean, this stuff just really sucks for characters that are affected. Like, there's just no other way to put it. I mean, I think they have to do it to some degree because they know that they have more servers than they need. And when they were spinning up so many servers at the outset of the Classic, we talked about it on the show, I think, like, man, this seems like a lot of servers for perpetuity. But that said, like, it sucks if you are an affected player by this. Like, if you have a character in a guild and an ecosystem on one of these servers that's going away, man, like, you just stand to lose so much of your identity with your character, your name, your guild, the stuff in your guild bank potentially. It's probably hard to keep a guild and a community together through this whole process. So I do feel bad for the affected players. I do think it's probably, necessary for the health of the overall, Classic environment. But man, it's, it's pretty drastic for people that are affected by it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then last but not least, will your UI/character settings be saved? In other words, like your macros and all that kind of stuff. That stuff is currently saved to the server and has been copied over when transferring, so it should all carry over fine. There shouldn't be an issue with that stuff moving over. I would still recommend copying your WTF folder. There is a way to essentially copy your WTF folder for your character. You go into your World of Warcraft, you actually copy that folder, you just save a copy of it. Once you've transferred, your character's been transferred over, if stuff is broken, all right, only if stuff is broken, you can go into that folder and actually rename the folder for your character to the new server name, as opposed to the old server name. It'll be like your character name dash the server name. And if you rename that, then it should basically, when it opens the game, look to that file to pull all your character settings, and you'll get all your macros back and all that stuff back. You might still have some stuff that you have to rearrange, like if you move your character actual icon on the screen and your target icon on the screen, you might actually move those back. Those might not move over with those settings when you do the WTF thing. But if something breaks, I always recommend, like I do it basically after every major UI change I make, anything like that, I always save a copy of my WTF on my computer or in a Dropbox or something like that. Just because if something goes wrong, I want to be able to recover the work that I've put into making the game what I want it to be when I play it. So certainly a recommendation I make in this situation too, when they're doing these large transfers and changes happening.
Yeah, I mean, the good thing is a lot of stuff is server side, so you don't have to build like the basic stuff from scratch. So, but yeah, it's always a good policy to back up your interface in WTF folders and have a copy handy, especially if you play on multiple machines or something. And it's way easier to just copy something over your from your network or your Google Drive or something than doing it on that machine after you did it on the first machine.
Yeah, exactly. All right, with that, we're going to play a quick sounder for our patrons, and we'll be right back. Hi, everyone. I'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons. They contribute a ton to our show and help us to improve on the content we create. Today, I'm giving a special shout out to Arajian, Celian, Infark, Kapawi, Mibble the Mighty, Nick, and Shorel. Thank you. This sounder is for you. That's right. We have a Patreon over at patreon.com/thestartingzone. If you want to hop on over there and show us some support, feel free. We use all those funds towards supporting the show, growing the show, and hosting the show, all the costs associated with uploading and hosting the show. So we will always appreciate when you all are able to help support us in that endeavor. And we love making these episodes, and we do these sort of call-in shows. Like this past week, we did our June patron call-in show, and it was really good and a really good time talking about sort of how people feel around the raid tuning and raid difficulty in the game, and had a lot of good participation and chat in that. So thank you very much to everyone who participated in the June patron episode. And a big shout out and thank you to our newest patron, Ryan S. Thank you very much. We always appreciate saying hi to new patrons, and feel free to hop on over to our Discord over at thestartingzone.com/Discord and join the conversation with us there as well, Ryan.
Yeah, welcome aboard. Thanks for the support, and thank you to everybody who helps make stuff like our bonus episodes possible. Yeah, it was a really good chat about it. It was a pretty focused, chat.
Episode,
I feel like on that, but it's been a hot topic around everything this whole season. So I think it was good to dive into it a bit and hear what some of our listeners and patrons' perspectives have been. So it was a great time. So thanks to everybody who either contributes and makes the shows happen and or participated directly in the show. It really means a lot to us, and it's a privilege to be able to do it with you.
Yeah. All right. If you folks have enjoyed this episode, consider heading on over to your iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Leave us that 5-star review. They really help out our show, and we love reading reviews from our listeners. That wraps up episode 527 of The Starting Zone. If you want to check out show notes for this episode or leave us a comment on the show, you can head on over to thestartingzone.com, the official website for the Starting Zone podcast. We also have a Discord server, like I just mentioned, at thestartingzone.com/Discord, as well as our Twitter, which is at The Starting Zone. And we have a Gmail. If you want to submit some questions or some feedback, you can email us at thestartingzone@gmail.com. Our episodes also go up on video over at twitch.tv/thestartingzone. We host a live show, and then we sort of take that in the audio format, and I make sure it all sounds pretty and whatnot, and release it out on all of your pod. But we also take that video and then put it out on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/thestartingzone. If you're trying to find our YouTube channel to watch the videos, they're also in all of our posts. So you actually went to thestartingzone.com and clicked on any of the episodes from when we started doing our YouTube stuff, which is probably about 15-20 episodes ago. You can actually see the YouTube video embedded right in there and watch it there if that's something you want to do. So feel free to find The Starting Zone wherever you want when it comes to that. And if you want to get your hands on some TSZ gear, you can find that over at TeePublic. That's teepublic.com/stores/The Starting Zone. You can check out all the designs on shirts and mugs and stickers and all that kind of stuff that we have going. And they often do big 33% off sales or 30% off sales. So be sure that you're taking advantage of the sales when you can. And Jason, where can folks find you on the internet?
Best place to find me, as always, is over on Twitter. You can find me over there at Shieldwald. Always talking whatever I'm doing in and around WoW and other stuff. And you can find me streaming WoW over on twitch.tv/Shieldwald. Normally Tuesday, Wednesday, and Sunday nights Eastern time, but probably, I think this week I'm probably still going to be off since I'm going to be out Wednesday. I'm not going to get back into it quite yet, but I think maybe another week or so here, and we'll get regular streams going again. So check the channel out over there. Nice.
Yeah, I'm sort of in a similar situation where this week I'm off. Next week I'll probably be back with some more stream stuff. This week is my 10-year anniversary, starting tomorrow. That's the official day, so I'll be celebrating with Robin our marriage for 10 years, which is awesome. And next week when we get back into raiding, I'll get some streams going again, and I'm looking forward to seeing all those faces that stuck with me through Jailer Prague showing up every night. I really appreciate you all. I'm hoping to see some of the familiar faces back when we start doing the nice reprog of Farm, which I imagine will go much smoother than our initial one, since all the bosses are like massively different now than they were.
15% easier at least.
Oh, at least, yeah. So we'll see how all that goes. I'm excited to hopefully get down to doing a 1 to 2 night clear in that raid going forward, and then we'll look at whatever else we're doing, start getting people their mythic mounts. That's all going to feel really good. So yeah, looking forward to doing that. That's twitch.tv/SpencerHD. And you can also find me on Twitter at Spencer_Downey. Thank you very much. For Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening, and jobs done.